Okay, hello and welcome to another video. I'm going to talk about how we're often asking the wrong questions when it comes to how to train for muscle growth. Things like, how many sets should I do in a workout? How often should I hit my muscles for maximum growth? Things that we all wonder. Those are the wrong questions to ask because the answer changes depending on where you are in your fitness journey, whether you're a brand new beginner or you're extremely advanced. And this contributes to a large amount of the disagreement or gray area within the fitness space. And some people are claiming that this amount of sets is what you have to do for growth. And other people are claiming that this amount of frequency is what you have to do for growth. And there's a lot of butting heads and opposing views. And a large part of the reason is this is different prescriptions work better at different times throughout your journey. This is what I've seen to be very powerful for myself. So I'm going to walk you through what my recommendation is for your general program structure based on what part of the journey that you're on, whether you're just getting started out or you've been lifting for a long time and you're stuck in a plateau. And hopefully you can use this information to adjust your training so that you can go make a few changes so you go out there and get some more muscle growth. So let's get into it. I'm going to get a shot of whiskey in me to get this train really rolling. Hopefully we stay on the tracks. As you know, if you're familiar with the channel, the cargo is susceptible to sliding off the tracks once the rails have been lubed with a little bit of whiskey. So hop on board at your own risk. Cheers to more gains. Sometimes it goes down smooth, other times it really hits that spot. All right, I've got this broken down into 4 stages of your lifting journey. And stage 1 is you're brand new. You're just getting into the gym. You haven't started training yet. Here's what is going to work the best for you. And that's going to be completely different than what I'm going to be recommending at stage 4, as you'll see. So what I think is the most important thing to do when you're first starting out is this combination of mastering your lifting technique with learning to train with really high intensity. So you need to get familiar with the movements with lighter weight so that you can execute them properly. And you want to learn to move your muscles, not to move the weight. So if you're doing a standing bicep curl, you're not bringing the weight from your waist up to your shoulder. You're contracting your bicep muscle, and as a consequence of that, the weight happens to move. You need to learn to think about this if you're training for muscle growth. Strength, performance, different things are going to apply. But specifically for muscle growth, I think this is a crucial skill to develop. And the only way to do it is with lighter weight, focusing on your form, giving yourself a chance to develop this technique, and then pushing yourself to actual maximum intensity, literal physical failure, which is also a skill. So all of your energy in the beginning should be poured into this. This is disproportionately going to lead to way more muscle growth than any of these other factors. So I'm simplifying it for you. You don't need to worry that much. Volume, exercise, there's so much information getting bombarded at you and conflicting views. Cut all that out. And when I go in there, I'm picking a handful of movements that I like, and I'm going to develop expert level technique with them by doing a number of warm-up sets with lighter weight. So if it's chest day, chest and back, let's say, and I've chosen the dumbbell bench press, and my working weight, let's say, is the 40-pound dumbbells where I'm going to get like 12 reps. I'm going to start my first warm-up set with the 15-pound dumbbells, and I'm just going to do like 6 to 8 reps, not to failure, focusing on my form, thinking about my cues. Maybe I'm thinking about pushing my chest out some. Maybe I'm letting my elbows drift in a little bit. Maybe at the bottom I pause to make sure I feel a stretch. As I come up, I'm thinking about bringing the inside of my elbows into the middle. Things like this so that you can develop expert level technique, and you can't do it when you're stressed going, heavy weight, maximum balls to the wall. That's not the time to perfect your form. And I would do a number of warm-up sets. You do the first one, 15 pounds, and then you take a little rest, and you go up to the 20s, another rest, up to the 25s, another rest, 30s, at least 3 or 4 warm-up sets. So the time you get to your working set, you're warmed up, you're not going to have, your risk of injury is lower, and you've got good command and control of the movement and the muscle so that when you push to maximum failure, which is going to be your primary driver of growth in the beginning, in my humble opinion, that you can do it with good form, and your form doesn't deteriorate to get a high level of intensity, which you're going to be susceptible to as a new lifter. So that's why structuring it this way is really important, and the combination of mastering technique with intensity is really crucial in the beginning because you want to keep your form as strict as possible and be able to move the muscle, not just moving the weight, as you push yourself to your literal physical limit. And I think that your whole focus should be about this for the first 6 months. In terms of frequency, I think you should just train each muscle once a week. You don't need to do any more than that. It's not worth it. You're going to be able to see substantial progress, also known as newbie gains. The gains are going to be more plentiful than they'll ever be in your fitness journey. So hopefully this will, spark some motivation and, hook you in to see this amount of progress, because it's never going to be this easy further on. Anybody who's an experienced lifter knows what I'm talking about. So you train once a week, and I would recommend doing 5 sets per muscle in each workout. And you could just do like a chest and back day, a freaking leg day, and an arms and shoulders day. And you train 3 times a week, and you do 5 sets for each muscle, something like that, 4 to 6 sets, somewhere in that range, using warm-up sets and training to failure and developing this process and making sure that you're consistent and going to every session. And I think this should last at least 6 months. Just doing that, if you actually do that 100%, anybody that I've ever trained that actually does that puts on 5 to 10 pounds of muscle, roughly speaking. Even if you have bad genetics. The problem is you just people don't go all the time, and they don't develop this ability to push themselves while also developing the ability to feel the muscle moving. If you do those things 6 months in, you will probably have created 50% of your natural potential in terms of muscle growth. So you're going to put on a substantial amount of muscle gain if you actually go to all your sessions and push yourself to the limit. That's stage 1, which I think you should do for at least 6 months. And if you find that you stick with it for a month or two and then you fall off for a month, come back, restart the clock. You need to do that consistently for 6 months in a row before it's even worth it to go to stage 2. If you don't do that, then just revert back to stage 1, because what is going to stimulate muscle growth evolves as you progress. And you need to lay down this foundation with consistency and intensity in the parameters I've talked about for it to be beneficial to go to stage 2. And that's the thing that I think most of us are missing, and that I missed for a long time, is that we're looking for a static, fixed answer of what's the best amount of sets, what's the best rep range, what's the best frequency. I've seen it to drastically change over time. And again, that's why I think there's so many conflicting answers, is because you get people that are really advanced, they're seeing different amounts or different structures of workouts to lead to more growth than people who are complete beginners. And that's why there's so much confusion. Staying on track, a little bit off the rails there, but kept it mostly on track. After you've done that, you move to stage 2, in which case you're going to increase your frequency so that you're hitting all of your muscles twice a week. At this point, the upper, lower, or push-pull leg split's probably your best bet, where you do, Monday push, Tuesday pull, Wednesday legs, and then repeat again. Thursday push, Friday pull, Saturday legs, and you take Sunday off. That's what I'd recommend at this point. At this point, you're an intermediate, fairly committed lifter. You're past your newbie gains phase. You need to up the ante. If this is what you want to do, I think you can't just stick with the modality of stage 1. You're going to plateau out, and you need to up the ante and change some of these parameters to spark more growth. So the first thing is to increase your frequency to hitting the muscles twice a week. I would also recommend increasing your volume to 5 to 10 sets per muscle in each workout. And for all you math volume buffs out there, that's going to end up being 10 to 20 sets per week for all these people that are concerned about your weekly volume. And at this point, you should also emphasize progressive overload, chasing reps and weight. So in the first stage, yes, you want to try to push for one more each time, but I don't think it's of critical focus. And I don't want to distract you from developing the intensity and proper technique priorities. In stage 2, now that you have that foundation, it needs to become a primary focus to track all your workouts, keep your movements semi-consistent for each working muscle, at least the first exercise you do when you're fresh, and try to chase additional reps each workout, roughly operating in the 10 to 15 rep range. And once you get to the upper band of that, my dumbbell presses, I've got the 60s, and I can get 16 reps on the first set, 15 on the second set, 14 on the third set. Okay, that's pretty close to that. You're on the upper band of that rep range. Let's increase to the 65s and let those reps fall down to maybe 12 reps and continue from there and repeat that process over again. This progressive overload focus at this point in your training journey is going to produce the majority of your muscle gain. Again, this is assuming that you're maintaining your high level of intensity where you train to failure, in my opinion, all the time, but you could do it, at least some of your sets if you're skeptical of whether that's going to be too much or whatever else. I don't think you're going to produce the optimal or the maximum amount of results if you never go to failure. In my own experience, I've never seen that to be as productive to lead into growth. So that's stage 2, training twice a week, doing 5 to 10 sets per muscle in a workout, 10 to 20 in the week because you're training everything twice, and emphasizing progressive overload, chasing reps and weight. And also your consistency is also assumed to be rock solid here. This should last for at least 1 year. And this is where you're in your intermediate, you're like a committed lifter. And I think if you do this for at least 1 year where you don't, stay consistent with it and then screw off for 2 weeks and then come back, you need to stack a full year of being locked in and going to all your sessions and being super dialed in. At the end of this time period, I think you will have achieved 70 to 80% of what your natural potential of muscle gain is going to be. So the majority of the muscle you're going to layer on is going to be done within, at the fastest, 6 months for stage 1 and then an additional year for stage 2. So within a year and a half, if you do everything right and focus on these things, you could have achieved potentially 80% of all the muscle that's physically possible for you as a natural lifter. And at that point, you're going to plateau again. You're going to level off, and all these things I'm recommending within stage 2 are just going to produce maintenance. And you're going to notice that. And you're going to realize, wow, when I first started, I saw a whole bunch of gains right away. I wasn't really training that intent, or that my structure wasn't that complicated. And then I elevated my structure by training more often, increasing my volume, and focusing more on progressive overload. And I was able to, increase a new load of gains to come into the station. But now I'm kind of capped there. And I would say this is where most people kind of go, okay, I'm at my genetic potential. I can't progress any further, because stage 3 and 4 require you to be a little, I don't know about psychotic, but you need to be extremely committed to lifting for it to be worth making these additional advancements. And for a lot of people, it's not. And they're pretty happy with the, maybe 10, 15, 20 pounds of muscle they've gained, and they're at 80% of what's going to be possible for their natural physique. To carve out these additional, remaining 20% of gains, it's the amount of effort put in is proportionally higher, and the amount of gains achieved is proportionally lower. So for a lot of people, it's not worth it. But if you do want to continue to progress, these are the things that I had to do to see more growth. Keeping your progressive overload focus as a top priority, but utilizing an explosive tempo within your progressive overload. So starting each workout with the consistent movements that you want to progress. It doesn't matter that much. Just pick a few for each muscle group and keep those consistent for at least a few months at a time so you can track in there. And then adding a little bit of explosive tempo, because the gains that you're going to get from just traditional progressive overload, assuming you're using a regular tempo, which like for a bicep curl will be 1 second up, 1 second down, roughly speaking, that's going to be tapped out at this point. And what I saw for myself was adding some explosive tempo to my lifts, where I come up with like a half a second, let's say, just add a little burst to the concentric for curls or for tricep extensions. Add a little bit of burst coming up and then control going down. I saw this to drastically increase my rate of progressive overload, in that the weight and the reps all of a sudden like kicked into gear. Like I poured some freaking NOS into the engine or whatever, hit the NOS button, and it revved up an additional gear. I know it sounds kind of gimmicky, but that actually made a huge difference in my ability to progress the weight, gain strength, and subsequently muscle gain. At this point, I would also recommend adding in a whole bunch of intensity techniques, drop sets. For anybody that's not familiar, you do your first set of curls with the 70-pound barbell, and then you go all the way to failure, and you put that down, and you rest 10 seconds, and you pick up the 60-pound barbell, go all the way to failure. That's one drop in a drop set structure. So you want to do 2 or 3 drops. You take that 60 all the way to failure, you put that down, you pick up the 50, you take that all the way to failure, you put that down, you pick up the 40. That would be 4 sets, 3 drops. That's a drop set, a way of intensifying each set further, so increasing the intensity. At this point in stage 3, I think this can be beneficial. Stage 1 and stage 2, I don't think it's necessary. Another thing would be partials, so like doing your curls and going to failure at full range of motion, and then doing some kind of half reps at the end, because you don't have enough strength left to get a full rep, but you could probably pump out a couple little choters. That's another way to intensify the set. Assisted negatives, using the curls as an example, just to keep it consistent. You go all the way to failure, and then you have a training partner with you who helps you lift the weight up, provide some assistance, and then you control the weight down, because you're going to be stronger in the eccentric or the negative. In the case of a bicep curl, that's when the weight is lowering. So once you've hit failure at a full range of motion, you can probably still do a handful of negatives if you have somebody there to help you bring the weight up, or if you're training unilaterally, one arm at a time, you can lift the weight up yourself. Those are a few examples of intensity techniques that I would add into your workout more at the end. The beginning of the workout is focus on progressive overload, and then at the end, you want to do some crazy intensity techniques like this. And the main thing driving growth is the intensity techniques paired with an explosive tempo in your progressive overload. And so this stage, I would say, is going to last 6 months to a year. And after you've completed this, be remaining consistent, going to all your sessions, not slipping up at all, you will have hit, in my opinion, in my experience, 90% plus of what's going to be possible for you naturally in terms of the muscle gain that you can potentially gain within your genetic potential and limits. A lot of potential in there. And stage 4, moving on, is the last stage where you're carving out that last 5%-ish of possible gains. And at this point, the amount of work put in is much higher and the amount of gains are much smaller. So it's, again, a potential assessment for each individual, depending on your life priorities and all these other things going on, if it's worth pouring even more into the gym to carve out a tiny bit more gains. Stage 4, what it looks like. You're going to keep your progressive overload the same, using a faster explosive tempo, at least most of the time, pushing to failure, adding some intensity techniques into your training at the end. And now you're going to start working in this variety stimulus, where every workout you do something different, particularly in the second half of the session, or alternating sessions, meaning your chest and back day on Monday, or your push day, let's say on Monday, you do your traditional progressive overload in the beginning, and then you move on to some intensity techniques in the end. Let's say you do bench press, barbell bench press with 5 drops, and that's kind of your intensity technique for the day. Your next push day, you need to do something different, and then alternate back and forth. Or every workout, do something different with the structure. I know it's not totally making sense. What I'm trying to say is that these parameters of how many sets do I do, what rep range do I use, what tempo do I do, what intensity technique am I going to use, should change every time so that you're never doing the exact same thing. A different exercise, a different rep range, different weight, different tempo, different number of sets, different rest time in between the sets. The second half of your workout, you want to capitalize on this variety stimulus. I saw this to produce a little bit of additional gains at the stage 4 level of advanced lifter. The other aspect, and so yeah, just as one more note on that, there isn't necessarily rules, and you have to be able to digest this concept of structure at the beginning of my workout with progressive overload, and then chaos at the second half where there isn't rules, and I need to get creative. So long as my intensity is high, I'm going to vary the rep range, vary the weight, vary the tempo, vary the rest times, vary the amount of sets, sprinkle in a different intensity technique, come up with creative random shit to do. I know that sounds wacky, but at this point, you're, at the end of the frickin' trail where you're just trying to make the last 5%, and doing the value of just doing something new starts to become more juicy or more valuable. The novelty stimulus, just doing something new, even if it's suboptimal, is going to potentially spark a little bit more growth. The other factor to add in at stage 4 is to potentially increase your frequency further to 3 times a week or plus. And at this point, your progressive overload is tapped. And this is what I've seen within the past year. The gains that I'm going to get from focusing on progressive overload are null. Even with a faster explosive tempo, I've tried using a higher rep range, a lower rep range, increasing the rest time a bit more, backing the rest time off, adding more sets. Nothing has produced more results. The idea that I'm going to go in there and progress the weight and then take 1, 2, 3, 4 days off and gain muscle and come back the next day is completely milked. And I don't think you should remove it from your program. I think you should still try to push weight, but it simply, for me at this point, does not produce any more results for my arms because they're at this final last stage. And the other thing that I've seen to lead to growth is going a little crazy with your frequency. So you could potentially switch to an upper lower. So you do Monday upper, Tuesday lower, Wednesday upper, Thursday lower, Friday upper, Saturday lower. So you're hitting each muscle group 3 times a week. And those are the things that I think can potentially etch out that very last 5% of gains left. And so as you can see, if you take the recommendation of frequency or volume or tempo or whatever at any point in time, it's different depending on where you're at. And this is a conclusion that I kind of stopped and thought about. And there's so much content of people saying, it's in, science shows, or I show with my impressive gains that this is the amount of sets, this is the amount of, and you're drawing conclusions without giving credit to the context with which you're pulling that conclusion from. And I can show you here that through these 4 different stages, roughly speaking, the training conclusion, at least in my experience, has shifted. And different things have worked at different times, and focusing on different aspects of training has proportionally led to more or less muscle growth depending on where I was in that journey. And that's the concept I want you to absorb. It's not a fixed answer. As your body adapts to your training, what's going to produce more growth on that path shifts over time. And the most productive structure is going to morph and change as you go.